Don't want to keep everyone waiting, so we'll get going, and regardless, we'll have a great discussion. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us for the second day of the second annual Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. My name is Kaylee Pratt. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Partnership for Strong Communities, and I am joined today by my colleague, Chelsea Ross, who is helping to work through some of those technical kinks right now. This year, the partnership is hosting a 3-day conference that features local, state, and national experts leading conversations that explore challenges, share best practices, and coalesce us around critical next steps to addressing key affordable housing issues across our state. You can join the conversation at hashtag CAHC 2021 on Twitter and follow us at PSC Housing if you haven't already. And as a reminder, this is our Legislative Roundtable. Before we get started, I will take a moment to thank our sponsors. We would like to thank our leading sponsors, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority and Elville Charitable Trust. Their deep support has allowed this conference to take place. And thank you also to our collaborating sponsors, the Connecticut Department of Housing, Webster Bank, and Rockport Mortgage. We also have many supporting sponsors for this year's conference that we would like to thank: Beacon Communities, Corporation for Supportive Housing, Elm City Communities, Fairfield County's Community Foundation, Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, JHM Group, LISC, National Equity Fund, and Trinity Financial. And last but not least, a big thank you to this session's sponsor, which is JHM Group. I will now hopefully stop sharing my slides. Great. All right. And before I turn it over to Bill to get us started, I just want to do a couple housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we will make all recordings available following the conference. This session is also being broadcast on CTN. All participants have entered muted. Please remain on mute unless you are asked to come off of mute. And if you have any technology issues, please select the chat icon at the bottom of the Zoom control panel, and we will do our best to assist you. Your speakers will let you know how any content questions should be submitted. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Bill Welz of Gallo and Robinson. Go ahead, Bill.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for sticking with us for some tech issues. I'm very excited to host or moderate this legislative panel, which we're hoping will be a little more populated in a minute, but we're working on it. But I am excited. I'll start introductions at least with the 2 reps that we got on so far. We're very excited to have State Representative Kristen Mccarthy on, who is serving her 4th term representing Fairfield's 133rd Assembly District. She is the House Chair of the Planning and Development Committee and a member of the Government Administration and Elections Committee and the Transportation Committee. As the Planning and Development Committee Chair, she's been integral in modernizing and reorganizing zoning statutes to provide greater clarity and tools to local planning and zoning officials. She's empowered towns and cities to facilitate economic growth. She's ensured inclusive communities. She's added energy and environmental protections to zoning codes and has allowed accessory dwelling units across the state. Very excited to have her on, and always excited to continue working with her on these very important issues. We also have State Representative Joe Zullo, who's serving his 2nd term representing East Haven's 99th House District. He is currently the ranking member on the Planning and Development Committee and serving on committees related to housing and finance, revenue, and bonding. So he is no stranger to housing issues in the state of Connecticut. He is a partner with his father in a private general law practice of Zullo and Jacks in East Haven, and he has served as the town attorney for the town of East Haven since 2011. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the other 2 I know are coming, but are having some tech issues, so we just get that out of the way. We should be getting on here any moment now. State Senator Rick Lopes, formerly State Representative Rick Lopes. He was elected to the State Senate in 2020 to represent the 6th Senate District, which covers Berlin, New Britain, and parts of Farmington. Prior to that, he represented the 24th Assembly District in New Britain, where he was first elected to that post in 2012. He's currently the co-chair of the Housing Committee and vice chair of the Aging Committee. He also sits on Appropriations, Higher Education and Employment Advancement, Planning, Development, and Transportation. No little work for a state senator. This past session, he championed legislation related to right to counsel for eviction proceedings and the creation of an energy retrofit grant program for affordable housing. And we'll be excited when we figure out how to get him on. We also have, trying to join too, we have State Representative Brandon Mcgee, who's serving his 4th term representing areas of Windsor and Hartford. He is currently the House Chairman of the Legislature's Housing Committee and member of the Appropriations and Education Committees. He was previously the chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, where he led the caucus through 2 legislative sessions. In the 2020 legislative session, he championed numerous bills, including right to counsel in eviction proceedings and the creation of an equity commission to study the intersection of racism and in public health. I'm very excited to have these folks on. We have a robust conversation, but since I only got Rep. McCarthy-Vahey and Rep. Zullo on right now, I think what we should really do is go line by line of 6107 and relive the entire housing debate.
I wish I could see Rep. Zullo's face right now.
Me too. I wish I could see both of yours, but all jokes aside, I'm very excited to have you guys here. And then for folks who don't know me, my name is Bill Welz. I joined Gallo and Robinson in 2018 after serving the administration of Governor Malloy. I've been involved with legislation, including updating CT zoning laws to promote affordable housing, access to vital records for homeless youth, affordable housing training for planning and zoning commissioners, state funding to prevent homelessness, and state bonding for affordable housing units. I thank the Partnership for Strong Communities for the long relationship with Gallo and Robinson and our continued work on these important housing issues. So I'll kick it off with a question to kind of get us started, and I'll start with Rep. McCarthy-Vahey. Is housing/affordability something you're hearing about locally from your constituents and in local officials, or do you perceive this as purely a statewide policy issue?
Well, Bill, thank you very much for having us here today. And Rep. Zullo, like I said, I wish I could see you, but as I texted to him, we'll have to pretend we're on a submarine. I absolutely hear about this issue locally, both from elected leaders and from constituents. In Fairfield right now, our Affordable Housing Committee is working on developing an update to our affordable housing plan. We just had an agenda item on our Board of Selectmen agenda to look at purchasing some property adjacent to a park to create a few affordable units this session. We had some property acquisition that the town is working on. So there's a robust conversation happening. And in particular, or specifically, hearing from constituents and just a few stories, personal stories. Met with a senior citizen who has a piece of property that's becoming onerous to take care of and wants to be able to downsize and stay. And even with a home that they own, are finding not as many options just in terms of supply to be able to go to and still be in a 1-story setting, which is what their house is. And then another person who I spoke with recently who is working at I would say a decent salary, although below our area median income, and just moved after the death of a spouse and is really having trouble making ends meet. So across the spectrum, from whether it's our young people who are returning from college and our seniors who are wanting to retire, this is an issue that I'm hearing more and more about. And of course, on the other side, hearing about, the concerns that some neighbors have in terms of development and density, change in the nature of height of buildings, and then also concerns about and questions about environmental impacts. And I think that's something I hope we'll talk about a little bit more in terms of the other side of the conversation related to environmental impacts. So that's a very long way of saying this is, of course, it's a state, a regional, and a national issue, but it's very much impacting here in Fairfield and in the 133rd district.
Thanks, Rep. McCarthy-Vahey. Rep. Zullo, I know I can't see, it's kind of strange, but I think you got the question, but if not, I'm happy to repeat.
No, I certainly did get the question, and thank you once again for hosting. Always great to be a part of this. Madam Chairwoman, always a pleasure to be speaking with you. And I did get chills though when you referenced 6107. For giggles, I opened up my outline again and remembered the fact that it was 26 pages. So I don't think any of us need to relive that again. As to the issue of housing affordability, I think the good chairwoman hit the nail right on the head. It's not just a local issue. It's not just a state issue. It's a national issue. If you talk to any realtor, they will tell you that housing stock continues to lag behind. It's at a historically low level, which is why you're seeing housing prices elevated, or at least one of the principal reasons you're seeing that. And because of that, you just have upwardly mobile millennials looking for their first house. You have families looking to upgrade. You have seniors looking to downsize so they can remain in the towns where their children and grandchildren live. So they're looking for low cost alternatives. So yes, it's an issue we hear about at all levels and in all contexts. Just the other day, I happened to be touring a brand new 55 plus affordable facility in East Haven. And the developers were telling me that they have a waiting list. It's over 70 units and they have a waiting list that's over 2.5 years long. They leased up in essentially no time, overnight, essentially. So demand is real, and it's certainly an issue that we have to continue to tackle in this and upcoming sessions.
Appreciate that perspective. Senator Lopes, I know you just hopped on, and I don't know if you got the question, but I'll repeat. We're looking for, is housing / affordability something that you're hearing about locally from your constituents or your local officials, or do you perceive this as purely a statewide issue?
I can't really speak. How you all doing? Sorry for getting on late. Can't speak to it as a statewide issue, but definitely in my district, affordable housing is becoming a tremendous issue. There's no availability, no vacancies. They come few and far between. Prices have shot up significantly, the fastest and largest increases in rentals I've seen in quite a few times. And housing prices have increased across the board. Even the housing stock and that had a hard time selling in New Britain for decades is now selling at a fast clip and for higher prices.
And I know you just hopped on, but I did give you a thunderous introduction, and I'm sorry you missed it. I put all the stops out, but thank you again for joining us today. I apologize for our tech issues. We're hoping with the Zoom platform that this would be a lot easier, but stuff happens. But we thank you for being here, Senator.
No problem. I'll look up the recording.
I guess I'm the only mug on CTN right now. So I'll go to the next question, and I know Mcgee's hopping on real quick. I'll come back to him for that first one. But you all worked on important legislation related to housing stability, housing affordability, zoning, and ending homelessness in the 2021 session. Could you tell us what provisions of any of those pieces of legislation that you are the most excited to pass this past session? And I'll start with Senator Lopes, since I did him last.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I got distracted for a second.
Yeah, that's okay. You worked on, Senator, you worked on some important legislation related to housing in this past session. Could you tell us what provision of those legislations you were the most excited to pass this past year?
Well, there were some small pet projects I put a lot of effort into that I think will help people, but smaller groups of people. The most impactful legislation, the right to counsel, definitely, out of the Housing Committee, I think will help mitigate any sort of dramatic eviction process that could hurt the economy or hurt the state as a whole. And that's definitely the most significant thing we passed this last session.
Rep. Zullo?
Sorry, still getting used to getting back on Zoom again. Sometimes you hit that mute and you forget it. Found out I was talking to myself. It's a bit wonky, and you want to laugh. We talked about remembering 6107, but I really do believe that revamping the Zoning Enabling Act was actually a very big deal. It was a multi-session endeavor. I think it was at least 3, maybe even 4 sessions. Including my predecessor, Rep. Zawistowski, who worked on it for quite a long time, along with Chairwoman McCarthy-Vahey, and it really made the act more cohesive and navigable, If you went to go through that act previously, I mean, it was a nightmare to read. It was a nightmare to navigate. So although I don't agree with every change that was made in it, I do believe that a greater good was achieved by making it more navigable. I'll also note that Rep. Paletta passed some great legislation which aligned the expiration dates of wetland and zoning permits. That came out of Housing Committee with the help of Chairman Mcgee. A lot of times someone would end up getting a wetlands permit or another permit only to have it expire while the zoning permit dragged out, while that process dragged out. And what that bill did was it allowed the timelines to essentially line up to prevent that from happening, which I know saves developers a lot of time and a lot of energy and frustration of having to go back. So I really thought those were two of many great proposals that we took on this year.
It's thank you, Rep. Zullo, for your work on that bill, and thank you for your work and helping on the clarity language. I do believe that was very important to make that a little more navigable for people who are trying to implement the state laws. So thank you for those comments. Rep. Kristen McCarthy, what say you about legislation that you worked on? What 6107 was a massive bill. Which provision in there do you think was the most exciting to pass?
Well, it's always hard to pick just one thing, but I will concur with Rep. Zullo. Wow, the ability to work through and get that reorganization done. It's those foundational things that seem a bit wonky. I think, as he said, I think that's huge. This one may sound a little strange because we legislators, we pass these commissions and committees and task forces, etc. But I am really glad that we have the opportunity to begin, hopefully very soon, as in the coming weeks, the Commission on Connecticut's Future and Development, to be able to bring together different departments and kind of unsilo, if that's a word, some of the conversations that we have around planning, and tied to that, the fact that we were able to pass a GIS bill. So working on those foundational pieces to help us as communities be able to very clearly and specifically delineate and understand where development is most makes sense, will be the most resilient, sustainable, and affordable. I think all those pieces tie together for me.
And I'll just say, folks, since I can't see you guys, if you guys wanted to kind of continue the conversation, like if one of you said something that one of you want to also chime into, just go ahead and unmute and just start talking. So cut me off. It's okay. Usually I would see somebody wanting to talk, but I can't do that. So just feel free if at any point you want to jump in on someone after someone's spoken, just go ahead and unmute. The next question I have for you guys which is heading towards the 22 short session that we're approaching. We just finished the long session. We're now going into the short session, which is the budget adjustment year. Are there any pieces of legislation that you passed in 2021 that you feel needs to be revisited? And I'll start with Rep. Zullo on this one.
I feel like I'm gonna keep circling back to 6107 quite a bit. I think we still have to go back and take a look, a closer look at it. I know we put a lot of hard work into it, but since its passage, and I know that the ADU portion, the accessory apartment portion doesn't go into effect until 1/1. But I've gotten a number of emails, a number of calls from municipalities asking about unintended consequences, practical effects. So we're starting to see municipalities say, hold on, we're starting to wonder whether this was such a good thing. What can we do to maybe tighten it up? I know that I've also heard, obviously, on the parking part. And frankly, on the flip side, there were a couple of other parts of that I think need to be looked at, more closely. I know that transit-oriented development is a big deal. It's something that a lot of people have reached out and they want to take a closer look at this year. We should take a look at it, frankly. There's a lot of opportunity there. It needs to be deployed, appropriately. But there's huge growth potential, and there's huge potential to be able to utilize it to address affordable housing concerns. We just need to get it done correctly. So I do think that that's something that we're going to have to go back and take a long, hard look at this year.
Rep. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thanks. I would say I concur in many ways with what Rep. Zullo said in terms of looking at, 6107 is really looking at 8-2. And I think what we learned from the conversation this time, a lot of people paid attention to 8-2 who weren't paying attention before. And I think we're going to need to continue to look at how things work for communities for certain. But the transit-oriented development conversation, certainly the short session is always a little more compact and timelines are more aggressive, but that issue is one that we absolutely have to be looking at more specifically and more intentionally, and perhaps in a more focused way without some of the other pieces that were on our plate before. Interestingly, I was looking at an issue of the September-October Preservation Connecticut News and reading about preservation and climate change. And one of the pieces of the article spoke to encouraging more compact development to reduce the energy needed for transportation. That was one of the things that they were talking about when it spoke to the preservation of historic places because of climate change. And so as a coastal community, both Rep. Zullo and I share this. These are things that we're wanting to look at. So I do think that will be a big issue. I know there are lots of groups who are interested in that, a lot of advocates, many of you on this Zoom who have brought this up to us before. And when we think about, TOD, we've got to think about affordability, because one thing that I didn't say in that first question in answering, do I hear about affordable housing availability in my district? There's been a significant amount of transit-oriented development by the Fairfield Metro train station. That was one of the reasons that the train station was developed. And those rents are higher than a lot of mortgages in town. And so how we look at affordability when we talk about TOD is going to be really, really important.
Bill, I'll also just add, since you invited us to chime in, a pet project of mine. It passed the House, but it did not get through the Senate because we had just run out of time. But it was House Bill 5679, and it was an act concerning a property tax abatement for certain first-time home buyers. And what it did was it would permit but not require towns to offer a $500 yearly tax abatement for any first-time home buyer purchasing a home in a municipality. At the time, it was certainly intended to help make housing more affordable for those looking to purchase their first house. Now, I think it becomes more valuable than ever with housing prices going up, meaning that people need to take out larger loans, meaning that their monthly loan payments are higher. That's a substantial savings. When you break it down, it could be the difference between somebody's loan to value working out as far as the purchase of their first home. So I think it's certainly something I'll try to push to get back over the finish line. I know Chairman Mcgee was tremendous in helping us get it through the House as we got through the last couple hours of the session. And I'm hopeful we'll have a chance to take another crack at it this year.
And even, short session, I always tell folks it might be shorter in length, but it's never really stopped the work. I mean, a tremendous amount of bills still get passed in the short session. And, a lot of the times it's some kind of, revisiting stuff that almost made it to the finish line, but didn't quite get there. But, in the 3-month period of time that we all have to get our work done, it's remarkable to me how everything still kind of works out and a lot of legislation gets done. So, encouraged to hear that you guys are out there already thinking about what the short session can look like. Sarah Lopes, what about on the housing front? Anything that you feel that got passed this past session that needs to be revisited in some way?
Probably Senate Bill 87 comes to mind, which would allow protections for group and family child care homes. It's one of those unfortunate bills that becomes controversial in initial thought, but I think in the long run, it definitely, I think all sides can come behind this bill. It would allow people who live in apartments to have a licensed child care home. And this became a bit controversial in that people felt that it was trotting over the rights of landlords. to say no to people having a childcare facility or a home childcare center in the multifamily house. But the hard reality of the situation is people currently do this anyway, with or without the landlord's approval or knowledge. You know, they watch other people's children. That's just a standard thing that happens throughout the state and country. This bill would set up a framework where people who want to do that would actually get licensed by the state, which would improve the professionalism, the safety, and protections for the landlord and the tenant and the children in the child care center, that they would be inspected, licensed, follow certain rules, certain levels of how many kids could be allowed in a particular unit. And I still maintain that this, especially with the child care shortage that we have in the state, something like this could go a long way, especially in cities, in alleviating that shortage of child care. And I'm hoping to get more people on board. I know there's a lot of resistance, but I'm hoping that we can get more people on board this year to get that passed.
And Sarah Lopes, since we're talking about this, just to maybe dig in just a little deeper for our audience members, could you at least lay out what some of the resistance is, and so folks are kind of aware here?
Well, there's situations where tenants would start babysitting, quote unquote, or having a child care in their apartment, and a landlord would say, I don't want you to have that, do that in my building, and evict the person or threaten eviction. And this would circumvent the landlord's ability to do that. They would not be able to evict based on this criteria that they're hosting a child care facility in their home. And as I maintained earlier, I mean, people are going to do it anyway. And it would be better off for everybody if the people performing the service were licensed and insured and did it in a more professional manner. But that's in a nutshell, that's really what it boils down to. It doesn't seem to affect the overall state. It's definitely in denser population areas, but it's also been evident in some of the suburbs. I know we came up with a case in Newington where it became a bit of a fiasco, where someone was performing childcare in their home, and I think a new landlord, the property was sold, and they said, no, you can't do that, and evicted the person, or wanted to evict the person. So it definitely became a problem.
May I jump in on this, Bill?
Absolutely, yes.
So Senator Lopes, thank you for championing this issue, and I am really happy and excited to continue to work with you on this going forward. The Great Resignation had so much, it had to do with a lot of, and has to do with a lot of different things, but certainly women and men who are having to care for their children, and of course we've seen it's primarily women who have had to resign from their jobs in order to face the childcare challenges that they have as a family, has had a tremendous impact on our economy. And this issue is one way that we can provide supply and support for the parents in need, but it's also a way for those parents who might want to be a childcare provider to be home with their child while also caring for others and providing a safe and nurturing environment. I was a parent who benefited from an licensed in-home childcare provider who was a tremendous support and guide as a parent, but also was the reason I was able to work. So this is really a critical issue, and I'm happy, Senator Lopes, to hear that you, and not surprised to hear that you're continuing to champion it.
We did get a question in the chat related to this proposal, and I'm monitoring the chat while also going off the questions that I have for you guys. But I'm going to circulate this into a question, and I'll free rein on who wants to answer it. Well, the question is, why not allow funds so that they can open a facility to do it? They can be provided being a homeowner themselves, so they're not renting and running a business in their own home. What are some of the hurdles that these providers have with opening facilities of their own, and why do they have to do this in the home?
Yeah, we're looking at very small facilities, and generally the people that are using these child home cares are walking distance to the person watching their child. It's not like they're going to get into a car and drive to a centralized location. It's usually very community-based, neighborhood-based, where people are watching neighbors, kids. So it's very hyper local, and there are large facilities out there for people who can access them. But this definitely targets a need for people in denser areas who need that local childcare facility.
And Bill, may I chime in as well, Bill?
Absolutely.
And if I heard your question correctly, it was why not provide subsidy and funding so that someone could go to another facility and have a facility or a childcare there? Was that?
It was like, how to help? Why can't the state provide funds for them to open a facility as opposed to running it out of their home? I guess is what the question was.
Yeah, and I think when I think about that, I think about barriers to entry, and just physically speaking, again, what I referenced in my comments, one of the things that I've seen over time is childcare providers who are able to stay home with their own children and simultaneously care for other children in a group setting. And if you're opening a facility, certainly you could bring your child there as well, but there's something very special and unique about an in-home childcare setting. And I agree with Senator Lopes. I certainly wanted to make sure that there was, all the proper safety procedures were followed, that my childcare provider was protected with insurance, had training, backup, and support as well. So I think that there are certainly so many wonderful facilities. We have one right here in our neighborhood that provide childcare, but having that, just like we talk about diversity of housing stock, it's diversity of providers and diversity of settings for people to be able to choose. We sure do need a lot more.
It's certainly interesting how the housing issue, reaches across the spectrum on stuff. How we talk about housing diversity all the time, and we're also talking about diversity in care too. So I appreciate you guys for all your work on these issues and connecting the dots, which is what legislators are good at. So appreciate that. Regarding the next session too, we talked about anything that needed to be revisited. Do you guys, and I'll start with Rep. McCarthy-Vahey on this one. Do you feel there's any low-hanging fruit that, there's something like, we could get this done? This could be a nice, easy accomplishment to do something good. Do you feel there's anything out there in the housing and zoning world that could be accomplished this year that's kind of like leftover low-hanging fruit?
I wish you could see me smiling, Bill. And I'm betting Rep. Zullo and Senator Lopes are smiling, and if Rep. Mcgee's here as well. I think that the issues around zoning in particular that have come before P&D were really complex, and there was a lot of emotion around it, and also difficult that we were not together and doing this via Zoom. I'm very hopeful that we will be together in person for these conversations, and have been strongly advocating for that as well. But I do think that low-hanging fruit versus no cost or low cost are two different things. And I think some of the conversations we referenced earlier, specifically the transit-oriented development, that's not a low-hanging fruit issue, but I think it's something that we have the ability to achieve some consensus on. And I think will be a focus of conversation for us.
Rep. Zullo?
Sure. And, again, it is a short session, and as the good chairwoman likes to say, the book of business we have it's always expanding. So trying to pick the low hanging fruit, the easier initiatives is a challenge, and you want to do that. We've got a GIS working group right now. I know this is a pet issue for the chairwoman. There are still some concerns from members of my caucus, but I see it as a worthwhile initiative, something that we really need to explore, something that aggregates all this data, makes it available to everybody, makes it uniform. Other states have done it, and I'm excited to learn more about it. We had a proposal, SB 868, which concerned the regulation of community residences. It arose out of a local issue, but an issue that's happening that's ripe to arise in other municipalities that just sought to eliminate an ambiguity loophole where facilities were applying to local zoning as group homes, and then later on getting a certificate of need to function as medical facilities. And you know, I think that's low-hanging fruit. There's no fiscal cost to the town or to the state of that proposal, and I think it addresses a need that, or you know, an issue that arose. So I think that's certainly something else that we can go take a look at in this short session, since it already had a public hearing and since we've already hashed a lot out.
Senator Lopes.
Well, I would like to say maybe the right to housing bill that we passed out of the Senate and didn't come up for a vote in the House. On some levels, you can say it doesn't do much. It's a very aspirational bill, but it definitely sets the tone for state agencies to say that we believe all people in the state have a right to housing, and we need to work in that direction and try to set up mechanisms in the administration to work towards achieving that. So I think it passed fairly easily in the Senate, if I remember correctly, with some bipartisan support. So I was kind of hoping next year, if we get it through, it'll get a vote in the House as well.
Well, somewhere I think your colleague Senator Anwar is smiling that you brought up the bill that I know he's been working on very diligently, and you have too, Senator Lopes. So thank you for your service on that. And you know, I think your colleague is happy you brought up his bill. Kristen, we did get a question in the chat, which it's your favorite topic. Somebody did ask what GIS stands for, and I think they probably want a little more information on what you guys are working on. Could you give a little overview on what the GIS task force is working on? And you're on mute if you're talking, and I can't.
Yep, sorry. You know what? I was actually clicking on the wrong computer. I actually am really grateful for the question, GIS, and also for the reminder that so often we speak in alphabet soup, and we really have to remember to not do that. So forgive me. GIS, Geographic Information System Mapping. And we use GIS in our day-to-day lives for, you know, our phones rely on them, our property assessors, our emergency management folks, our transportation planners, our planners for building and housing all rely on that mapping to help us understand data about our topography, about our boundary lines, about our waterways, about so many things. We were able to pass legislation, and we are still working, and I know the state is in the process of hiring for a position to be able to bring together that group across different departments and across different disciplines, as Rep. Zullo said, to help aggregate data, make it uniform, more accessible and available. And when we have that information in that way available to us, we're able to do better planning and to prepare for whether it's, you know, issues along our waterways, or whether it's issues related to economic development, to land conservation, and again, emergency management, everything in between. It's amazing. There are layers, what those layers allow us to see. And in an increasingly visual world, and I'm laughing because of course you're just hearing my voice, but in an increasingly visual world, the ability to visualize is so important. And we saw that used this session when we talked about 6107. We had Desegregate Connecticut bring that the zoning atlas to use visual representations of how zoning laws work in communities. So again, having that data available and accessible so that not just those who have the expertise are able to use it, but all of us is, I think, something we really want to be working towards more and more. And I just say thanks to all those GIS professionals out there who have been doing that coordinating and collaborating on their own. And hopefully this will help leverage their work and provide more opportunity for all of us.
Rep. Zullo, I think you unmuted yourself, Dave. Was there something you wanted to add?
No, that was a mistake.
Oh, no worries, no worries. I'm sure we're still having some tech hiccups. I was hoping to hold this question for Rep. Mcgee, because I know this is something he's passionate about, but I didn't want to leave it out there without at least getting this into the fold. We did get a question in the chat about a system for building wealth, for building the wealth gap and building up home ownership in Black and Brown communities. Is there? I'll start with Senator Lopes on this, because I know that he sat next to Rep. Mcgee and talked about this stuff a lot. What do you think that it's something out there that could be done to help build up some more home ownership in these communities?
Maybe the broadest question I've seen heard in a long time.
Sure is.
I do wish for Brandon here. There are so many different little things that can be done, and there's a debate of trying to open up rural and suburban areas versus developing up existing urban areas. As an urban legislator, I'd like to see a lot of, despite the fact that we talked about a lot of zoning changes statewide, I would like to see a lot of emphasis also put into the urban areas to simply improve the housing stock and improve the other problematical issues of being in an urban area, which mostly revolve around education systems, to make them more accessible or desirable. So we have people, not quite gentrification, people moving into the city and increasing the prices, but people being more interested in moving into cities and densely populated areas to level off the playing field between this two sides of Connecticut that I always see, the rich Connecticut and the poor Connecticut. So anything that we can do to stop that divide, that gap that exists in Connecticut between rich towns and poor towns, and shrink that divide is something I'm very interested in, but nothing specific off the top of my head right now.
Thank you. And Rep. Zullo, Rep. McCarthy, I know if there's, I just got a text that Rep. Mcgee is still trying to hop on, but if there's anything you wanted to add from Senator Lopes' comment.
Bill, I'll jump in really quick and just also note that, I think we often, and this is more of a broad, just drawing everyone's attention to it. I think we so often look at the concept of affordable housing and affordability from the perspective of deed restricting. And I think that we need to start looking for solutions that go beyond deed restricting. I understand that deed restricting guarantees that a house or a property will remain affordable for a set time, et cetera, et cetera. But what deed restricting also does is it prevents the accumulation of wealth. And the question went to the issue of accumulating wealth. So I think what we need to do is figure out how we can make housing affordable, how we can lower barriers to entry, but then at the same time, once that barrier is met and breached, allow individuals to accumulate wealth by allowing them to enjoy the benefits of their property appreciating over time. And that's something that people can't do right now because of deed restricting. And again, it's a broad topic. It's more of an intellectual conversation to have, but it's one that needs to be had if we really want to meaningfully take on affordable housing in future sessions.
And I see Rep. Mcgee just joined us. Sorry for any of the tech issues that we had, and I'm sorry that we can't see you, but thank you so much for joining us. I did give you a thunderous introduction while you were trying to join, and we were actually talking about a topic that I know that I've heard you speak about, and Senator McCrory as well, talking about this idea of building up the wealth gap and providing a pathway to home ownership within oh wow, you got the video working. All right, you're the first one. We were talking about building up wealth gap and more home ownership in Black and Brown communities. Is that something? I imagine you have some thoughts on this one.
Yeah. So sorry for the delay. I've not had this type of difficulty getting onto a Zoom, but you guys are fancy, so this is really cool. So the question was what again in terms of development in Black and Brown communities? What was the question again?
It was kind of a broad question. Building the wealth gap and providing more opportunities for home ownership in Black and Brown communities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot has already been said, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I've been accused of saying, we have to invest in areas where it's been under resourced, underdeveloped for so many years. And I think now, with all of the federal dollars from DC, and kudos to our congressional delegation on securing quite a bit of funds to bring back to Connecticut, we should be using a lot of those funds and opportunities to develop quality housing in neighborhoods where they exist. Sure, we want everyone to be a homeowner, but in order to do so, we also have to simultaneously create job opportunities so that those who are first-time homeowners will have the opportunity to experience that. But there needs to be a willingness and a commitment from many of our municipal and state leaders throughout the state in recognizing that many of these communities have been impacted by these deeds that we've been talking about, by redlining and gerrymandering, and the list goes on. And we could have an entire hour talking about why communities are designed the way they are. But I'll err on the side of just saying now is the time. And we have an opportunity to make all of the wrong right here in the state of Connecticut.
And it's refreshing to see you on video. I've unfortunately been talking to some blank screens, but it's nice to have somebody here that I can see too. So it's good to see you, man. It's been too long.
I thought some of my colleagues would at least be on. I have to pull my phone out, man. The computer wasn't working, so
they're on. It's just they've only been audio only. It's you figured out the video. You got them at you figured it out. Well, we're gonna have to figure out what you did there, but you did something right.
Bill,
well, I'm glad to be on.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Go ahead, Rep. McCarthy. Sorry.
Thank you, Bill. And it's Rep. Mcgee. It's really nice to actually get to see you and to hear your voice both. I just wanted to add on to what Rep. Mcgee is saying, which is really, as someone who is not a person of color, it's important for me to listen to my colleagues who are living in communities that are coming up with ideas and solutions that work for the communities. And I think that's one thing that's really important. Second, I think it's important that we, as in this issue and in so many others, that we learn how to have constructive conversations about race and racism, about class and classism. And we certainly experienced this year within the Planning and Development Committee and within housing, a lot of really difficult conversations that people struggle to have sometimes in constructive ways. And I think that's something we've got to continue to get better at, because there is clearly tremendous opportunity gap, tremendous wealth gap, and home ownership is certainly one way that federal tax policy, local zoning, state policy for many years have gone a way that has given many people who are people of color a lack of opportunity in that way. So I think we are going to need to look at this in a systemic way. So there will be certain specific programs. I know Rep. Zullo referenced earlier an idea that he has, but there are a lot of specifics that I think we can get into. But just again, that overarching conversation about acknowledging the racism and classism, and then becoming more proficient in how we discuss it.
If I may, I just
go ahead.
To what Kristen just said, I think everything she said is dead on. But oftentimes as policymakers, and I'll just from myself, we create new policies all the time, a lot of them. And I think now is the time that we take some of the existing policies, throw some of them away, by the way, but we take some of these policies and we do something with it. The people closest to the problem, as my colleague would always say, are the ones with a lot of solutions and answers to many of these difficult questions that we discuss and we ask about. So I guess what I'm getting at is there is a playbook. And we should take a bit more time to really talk through how do we have great impact in many of these communities throughout Connecticut that have not experienced home ownership, quality housing, neighborhoods that are vibrant. What's missing from those conversations that continue to perpetuate this very
Oh, I think we lost him. We are getting close to time, so I think I'm going. Oh, he's coming back. All right, I think he got disconnected. Oh, there he is. You're on mute, Rep. Mcgee.
Yeah, at one point it wasn't allowing me to unmute, so I'm good. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And I would, unfortunately, there's another panel that's going to start at 2 o'clock, so I have to go to the wrap up question. I would love to pick all your brains a lot further, but so the final question that I have, and I'm going to start. I'll start with you, Rep. Mcgee, since you had said your stuff on. If you had $10 million, whether it be in appropriations or on the bonding side, where would you put it and how would you leverage it?
That's a difficult question. 10 million is definitely not a lot of money, but it is money. And I suspect, and is this a statewide question or would this be for your district, my district?
It's totally up to you, either or.
Oh, okay. Cool. I would definitely, partnership is key in everything that we do. So I would definitely connect with my municipalities. And there are already plans that have been completed, unfortunately, haven't been funded. So dust off some of those plans and really figure out, where to start and making sure that with the 10 million, we're able to sustain and kind of build on it. So I don't know. It's a difficult question to ask in the moment, but I guess that's something that we would do in my district.
Appreciate that. Sticking with the housing committee, Senator Lopes, $10 million, either an appropriation or on the bonding. What would you do with it?
Well, a lot of snarky responses I could give, but I'm going to take the assumption that this is outside of the request I've already made and they're already in progress. So I'm not going to touch my priority list of things that are already asked for. But for New Britain and even statewide, homelessness right now is probably the one thing I can think of off the top of my head that needs the quickest infusion. It is definitely getting worse. We're heading into the cold weather months and we need to activate more shelters. We need to activate more supports and try to curb this through the pandemic or whatever. It's definitely, I think everyone has seen an increase in homelessness tied to the substance abuse, tied to lack of supports. It's an endemic problem and $10 million isn't enough, but if we had extra money lying around, that's the direction I'd like to throw it.
Good to hear. Rep. Zullo?
I was going to joke, if I had 10 million, I would call up my mayor and say, let's put it all to capital. Let's get it all to East Haven in the 99th district. But in all seriousness, as great as that would be, I proposed this to the majority leader as part of our discussions on affordable housing, that I would do a local redevelopment incentive program. I would pilot it where I would want to do low and no interest loans to minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned small businesses to acquire and redevelop properties with meaningful affordable components. So rather than use mandates, pilot a program where we actually really incentivize it and see if it pans out, see if we actually get that hyper local affordable development that we want. 10 million is not a lot of money, but it's enough to do a pilot like that, particularly if it's in 1 or 2 towns. So that's what I would do.
Thank you for that. Rep. McCarthy Vay?
Thanks for the question. I love how Rep. Mcgee framed it, that it's not a lot of money, but it is certainly a lot of money. And that's, I think, well put. When it comes to housing, developing housing is expensive and it requires investment of millions of dollars, whether that's on the part of government, the part of builders, the part of municipalities, and it has to be done by everyone. But for me, I'm betting you're not all going to be very surprised to hear that I would invest that money in something like the GIS resources or other planning functions for our state, so that we can help create the foundational pieces, the communication and access to information, and provide those structures that will support the work that has to be done. Just like all of my colleagues, I also have some projects here in Fairfield that I would be interested in seeing developed near a train station. But I think that's, for me, where I would probably look at is how do we take those dollars and help to assure that those planning pieces, which that proper planning leads to good development, to sustainable, resilient development that can provide the affordability and economic development for communities.
Well, I'm hearing a common theme here, and I hope all the districts that with affordable housing projects that you guys are talking about, I hope that a future bond commission will be beneficial to you all and to the state of Connecticut. So I just wanted to wrap up real quick. I want to thank you all. I wanted to thank Rep. Kristen McCarthy of Fairfield, Rep. Joe Zullo of East Haven, Rep. Brandon Mcgee of Hartford, and Senator Lopes of New Britain for your time today and your advocacy and your continued work on these very important housing issues. I look forward to working with all of you next session and hopefully seeing you in person. And thanks again. And I think Kaylee has an announcement before we close off, and I'll kick it to Kaylee. But thank you all so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you guys taking the time.
I just wanted to pop on and share our gratitude for the legislators for joining us, as well as all the attendees. The next session has just begun at 2 o'clock. The next session is creating innovative staff development opportunities for the sector. So if you are planning to join that, you want to go back to the lobby and hit join session, and we hope to see you there. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you soon.